Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Linda Kenny Bodden. Well, we are switching gears now to closing statements in a trial against Nathan Woodyard. He's charged with manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide for his role in the 2019 death of Elijah McClain. Woodyard was part of a group of officers who responded to a report of a suspicious person leaving a convenience store in Colorado. They questioned McClain and allegedly placed him in a chokehold and injected him with the sedative ketamine, sending him into cardiac arrest minutes later. Now, Officer Woodyard was suspended from the Aurora Police Department force pending the outcome of this trial. So I'd like to take a listen now to some of the prosecution's closing arguments that happened today.
Just walking home. And grabbed him, threatened him that I'm going to change this situation. Certainly did. Elijah McClain walking home. He was dancing as he told the defendant he was stopping his music to listen. As he told the defendant, I'm different. I'm an introvert. Please respect the boundaries I speak. I'm just going home. Defendant, all the information he needed. Do the right thing. Elijah McClain told him in heartbreaking gasps sometimes, clearly and directly, what he was doing and why there was no need for this escalation of violence. There was no need to grab Elijah McClain while he was walking home from the store. The defendant told you that. On cross-examination, he said it would have been practical to just have a conversation with him. There was no need to threaten Elijah McClain that you were going to change this situation. He said, well, okay, when the defendant grabbed him and turned him around. There was no need for the defendant to work with his other officers, like Rosenblatt and Roedema, to take Elijah down to the ground. When they said, we're going to lay you down on the grass, the Woodyard told you that that meant they were going to execute a takedown. That was the plan, the next step from the grab to turning him around to taking him to the ground. The only thing Elijah McClain had done is to explain exactly what was happening. I was stopping my music to listen, and to tense his muscles because he was scared. And they're threatening to take him to the ground, and then they push him up against a brick wall. That sequence tells you everything you need to know about where the defendant's head was at on the night of August 24th, 2019. The word go, this was going to be an escalating physical encounter. And the defendant was trained and knew that that created risks. when this happened, he just kept escalating further. And after he knocks him unconscious with the carotid, the mask full of vomit in front of his face, saying, "I can't breathe, can't breathe, can't breathe." Who decided that it wasn't a medical emergency? Who decided that they didn't need to tell the paramedics about it? They told you it was him who made that decision. That changes the entire course of this encounter. Remember Madison Freeman, Elijah's coworker who came to talk to you? This photo was taken only a couple weeks before he was killed. It shows him in almost the exact same clothes that you saw, torn apart, covered in vomit, feces. All that was left, Elijah McClain was killed. He explains to the defendant who he was. The defendant didn't listen. He could have seen, if he'd stopped to listen and asked questions, who he was dealing with. He was dealing with the kid who was walking on his way home dancing, listening to his AirPods. And he told the defendant that's what he was doing. That he was walking home and that he was listening to his music and stopping it to listen. These actions in repeatedly escalating this encounter and in repeatedly ignoring his own training, that is what it means to be reckless. This is jury instruction 7. It's in that packet sitting right on your laps under your chairs. And I want to draw your attention to what it means to commit reckless manslaughter. And I want to be really clear about what it is not. This is not a premeditated murder charge or even a murder charge at all. There's no allegation that Mr. Woodyard intended to kill Mr. McClain. That is not part of this case. This case is whether about he recklessly caused his death, whether he recklessly contributed to his death. And recklessly means consciously disregarding a substantial and unjustifiable risk.
I'm joined here by my guest, Bob Hilla, who is still with me, and now joining us, trial attorney extraordinary Catherine Lizardo. Catherine, this is a heartbreaking case, the death of Elijah McClain. I mean, just everyone agrees upon that. The question is, will this officer be convicted of a crime here? Now, I hear the prosecutor saying a different type of theory. I hear the prosecutor saying that he has trained Woodyard to know that people can't breathe when they're down on the ground in that positional asphyxia, and that he can't breathe. He's saying he can't breathe. He's got a chokehold, whether or not this officer was part of it or not in terms of doing the chokehold. But instead, they put a mask over it, making him breathing further, and then do not tell the ER that it's a medical emergency because he couldn't breathe. Instead, tell the emergency responders, in fact, something else. That this is a kind of a different theory, isn't it?
It is different, but also similar in terms of we've seen this so many times in the cases we've seen regarding law enforcement, that the chokehold is causing them to asphyxiate, understandably so. And when someone tells you they can't breathe, common sense dictates just follow what they're saying, that they cannot breathe. Of course, the issue becomes going to the ketamine as well, that the paramedics ended up injecting him ketamine. What were the officers' action that led the paramedics to inject that? Because injecting ketamine is something I've never heard before. Maybe you have, but for a situation like that, to inject that much ketamine on him to sedate him and to subdue him was just extraordinary and completely reckless.
Yeah, I've never heard that either. But you know what? Where there is a prosecution closing argument, there's also a defense closing argument. So I'd like to take you there now.
It matters. It does. And the world was a much better place with him in it. We need to end in custody deaths. There's been too much violence. And the world will be a better place when that happens. These are important. These important facts don't conflict with the fact that Nathan Woodyard did not kill Elijah McClain. There's a lot of anger involved in this case. And there should be. Someone died. That's important. But the anger isn't only on one side of this room. Nathan Woodyard entrusted Elijah McClain to the care and custody of his fellow officers. He entrusted Elijah McClain to medically trained professionals. Elijah McClain died. That matters. Nathan Woodyard did not kill Elijah McClain. He's not responsible for what other people did or did not do. This trial has not been about Nathan Woodyard, and it needs to be. This entire trial, all the witnesses that have been testifying about other people. It has been about what other people were doing and what other people were not doing. And they just want him to take the blame. This is Nathan Woodyard. This case is about Nathan Woodyard. This is his trial. And we need to talk about him and not others. He was assigned the call. He was there. But he did not kill. Ketamine is what killed Elijah McClain. It was the ketamine that killed Elijah McClain. That's what this entire trial should have been about. This fact has been repeated over and over and over every time an expert took that stand. They all testified that it's the ketamine. Now, the government has done everything they can to muddy and to call into question that simple fact. But you know what happened. It was fire that responded to the scene. It was fire that decided in less than a minute and a half of arriving on the scene to give Elijah McClain ketamine. It was fire that decided to give him an overdose of 500 milligrams of ketamine, despite being explicitly trained not to do that. It wasn't a random number. It wasn't everyone shouldn't get 600. Everyone shouldn't get 300. It was right on the nose of what fire decided to do within a minute and a half of arriving on that scene. And just like that, right after Elijah McClain received that ketamine, I heard Dr. Terashenko say he suffered cardiac arrest. His heart stopped. He stopped breathing. before the ketamine, none of those were an issue.
So, Bob Hill, it seems to me that this has been the problem in this whole case to begin with. I mean, this shouldn't have happened at all, but there's been a big argument about whether it's the chokehold that caused Elijah McClain to die or just put him in a situation that the ketamine would then kill him with the overdose. And we do have 2 paramedics later on being charged with a crime for Elijah's death. Do you think, given what you have seen in this case, that the prosecution is going to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in the criminal case that Nathan Woodyard is guilty of a criminally negligent homicide or manslaughter?
Well, the problem here is that he's not the direct actor, as the defense emphasized here in its closing, which I thought was good and effective. How effective, we'll find out. I'm sure the state checked all the boxes in terms of the elements of the offense of reckless manslaughter. But in this case, it is about other people because this person wasn't acting alone. If there was evidence in this case that the ketamine injection caused this person, or the administration was excessive and it caused the death or contributed to the death, and he had nothing to do with that, the question's going to be, was it reasonable for him not to intervene in some way that would have prevented this? Or that somehow he contributed to the ultimate administration that resulted in the death, or that he should have intervened in some way. And that's something the jury's going to have to sort through on this case. Yeah,
very, very difficult to sort through, though, when your experts are all disagreeing and the prosecution says, look, he's trained, at least in this situation, not to do these things and certainly not to, apparently the prosecution was saying before the defense, Catherine Lizardo, to tell the ER that this was a medical emergency that didn't need ketamine to sedate Elijah McClain. Your thoughts?
Yes, and I agree with Bob in terms of this is all about the contributing factor, not so much as the direct cause of Elijah's death, but that the officer's action contributed, in addition to the ketamine, with his death. And with the prosecution, that's what they were trying to focus on. However, it's worth noting that the 2 trials of the other 2 officers before, and we saw the 3 officers lined up in one of our shots earlier, where one of them, Rosenblatt, was actually convicted of criminal negligent homicide, and Roedema was acquitted. So let's see how the jury will believe Woodman, because his charge is reckless homicide.
Yeah, very interesting, because as jurors, as we all know, you have to make an individual decision about whether the state proves a case beyond a reasonable doubt against each individual person, even if the whole situation was so awful that all of us who've watched that tape have cried over it. Anyhow, we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we'll bring you up to date on all of our cases in the docket. As you know, we have a trial in Florida involving hit people and relationships and affairs and extortion allegations. That's the Charlie Adelson, the Dennis case, and we'll tell you what's happening there too. Stay with us.